as a site that requires registration of a customer that opts out from bulk mailing? And the guy said, none. No value. In fact, they would prefer that those people don't read their newspaper. And I was like, huh, okay. That was a really interesting insight. The good news is it does seem like the registration is going where, at the very least, the other thing that they want registration for is they're trying to collect information on people for their local markets, for their local advertising. And that's why you're seeing websites do what they've been doing for Google News. And for us, in some certain situations, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, for example, allows traffic in from FARC. So does the Scotsman up in Edinburgh. You know why they do it is they detect the traffic as it comes in. If it's coming in from off-site, they allow it. If it's coming in from one of their other pages, they block it. Or, in some cases, the Miami Herald, I think, does this, but the page behaves strangely on different days. They'll let you hit it out from outside the first time, and then never again. You have to register if you want to try to read that article twice. It actually sticks a cookie on your machine that blocks you from that point forward. I'm not really sure why that is. I don't know what the value is there. It's somebody's idea that got passed around at a meeting or something. I have no clue. So, anyways, so things that I've learned since I started running FARC. Corporations own politicians, lock, stock, and barrel. That's one thing. Probably comes as no surprise to anybody, but in general, it's pretty much the case. There was an excellent talk in here at the 3 o'clock hour discussing that very issue, talking about how they're getting their own laws passed to prevent them from having to send out information that may be damaging to them, among other things. And, yeah, you missed it. So, yes. As far as, yeah, it does, but not for the reasons that I expected it would in the first place. I did it because there were some people that were begging for more links on FARC, more than they already, 75 to 100 we put up there anyway, which I think is excessive myself. But there are people who are news hounds and they've got to be reading stuff. They're the guys that like pull up the AP feed on Yahoo and just read it top to bottom, which is mind-boggling for me. But so I figured there's somebody told me they would pay for it. I'm like, well, all right, sounds good. So we'll just go ahead and set this thing up and let people do it. What's happened since is that the vast majority of people that have signed up for it either do it because they like the site and they never read it, or they signed up for the community that exists inside there, which is really reminiscent of the way that FARC was back in the early days, which was kind of surprising. That's a whole other discussion on the way the communities evolved, but it's very surprising to me that was possible to get back. It was kind of shocking. Something else I've learned is it's either really hard to write good satire, or The Onion has just ruined everybody. I'm not sure which it is exactly. I think The Onion kind of cops out on a bunch of stuff. Speaking of people that have their set format for newspapers, I mean, it seems like when they run out of stuff to do, they either do Area Man eats the entire goddamn bag of chips and 1,000 iterations on the same and write an entire article about it or whatnot. I have a theory on online media satire, and that is if I can tell what the entire article is about by reading the tagline, then I'm not going to read it. I'm not. And a good example of something that is not like that was an article that I read about 3 years ago, I think. It was talking about how rioters in L.A. were preparing for the eventual world championship that they were going to get. It was one of the years where they were definitely going to get it. And that seemed kind of interesting, so I went and checked it out, see what they're doing, stuff like their moms were packing them lunches, and they were picking out their best bricks, and, checking for, heaving distance and whatnot, marking up targets to set fire to later on, It was a really good article. It was one of those, you couldn't tell what the article was about by just reading the tagline, and it seems like too many people have kind of lost sight of that. That's just my own opinion, though. People like pictures. You put the words "with pic" on a FARC tagline, and it'll get 5 times the hits. No matter what the article's about. Really helps with astronomy articles because nobody really gives a shit about astronomy. Let's face it. But you put a "with pic" on there, like they just discovered a new planet, and we've got a picture of it. Oh, well, hell, I got to check that out. Got to see what that looks like. I mean, it's the same with the boobs, obviously, but it's a little bit, lower down on the scale. For the boobies? That's kind of hard. It's almost random, honestly. The main things that we're looking for are I don't like porn. It sounds strange, but I don't. Nudity. Woohoo! Let's do it. But, porn, I got a real problem with it. What's that? Yes. That's the first one. The second one is that it's got to have, obviously no viruses, Trojans, et cetera, et cetera. We've had an interesting problem crop up in the last year, actually, is that it's bait and switch. We'll find a site that we think is pretty cool, post it, and they'll notice the traffic, and then they'll stick every high-paying ad in the world up there, and viruses and Trojans and all kinds of crap. So that's one of the reasons why people have been complaining there haven't been that many of those links, and the reason is because we can't find that many good ones anymore. They just end up getting co-opted and wiped out. But so basically stuff that's not intrusive, mostly attractive chicks, with the exception of the one we posted Monday, which is the world's worst boob job. I don't know if anybody saw it or not, but oh my god, what the fuck is wrong with people? So it's almost random though. After that, I mean, there's usually like 5 or 10 good ones in a given day, and you can pick from that. Other things I've learned: somebody in the world somewhere every week gets their penis cut off. Usually by their wife or girlfriend, sometimes by themselves, sometimes by farm implements. It happens with a pretty frightening regular basis. It's right up there with semi-tractor trailers full of food overturning on the highway nonstop. That one doesn't surprise me too much. I mean, there's enough accidents. I mean, most tractor trailers are carrying something. It's probably going to be food if it's going to be anything. Other things that I've learned is that small independent websites have a lot of power, and I don't really necessarily include ourselves on that, but it's on the level of the Fark and Slashdot, we can actually crash out sites. There's only one website on the planet I can link to for video, and that's iFilm. That's it. No one else can take a hit. The occasional local news corporation can, but iFilm's the only one that can actually withstand a direct hit to a link, and that kind of changes the ability of what you can do. It's gotten to the point now where I actually have iFilm's contact information, and whenever something happens that I need to have video too, I contact them. And a good example of that was a buddy called me up right in the middle of Jon Stewart's famed appearance on Crossfire, where he was calling them all a bunch of dicks. And I after watching that was absolutely hilarious. And so I contacted iFilm. I said, "You guys got to find somebody who had that and put that thing up." And they did. And it's been the most popular link they ever posted for them. So it's interesting with that how that works. But also at the same time, you can do other things. Like for example, we've done some fundraising. I'm a big fan of giving to charities, but I don't like giving to like just regular charities. Like there's a bunch of bloggers out there that got together to fight breast cancer, female bloggers, and basically if they made X amount of money, they just show their boobs. And I was like, well, all right, I can get behind this. There's Ernie from Ernie's House at Whoop-Ass. He's got his thing called Let's Bring Him Home that he does every Christmas, where he was in the military, and it turns out if you're in the military and you've got leave over Christmas, and most of them do, you can afford to have your own plane ticket home, you can go home. But if you're in Afghanistan, that's a little difficult, isn't it? It's very expensive, takes a lot of time. So he created a website to basically raise money to bring soldiers home over the holidays. And I think he ended up getting, I don't remember how many hundred it was this year. I remember the first year it was like 20, but and so we tried to help out by giving him a little bit more high profile thing. One of the charity organizations that popped up, which really fascinates me, is a guy who's actually on Fark all the time. Runs a website called Architecture for Humanity. I don't know if you guys have seen this or not. It's one of my absolute favorite charity organizations because I think what they've done is fantastic. This guy created he's an architect, and he created a kit that costs $200 that will convert a container, like that they use on container ships to haul freight around the globe, into a house. It basically consists of a tarp you put over top of it so you don't melt, and a little kit that makes the door easier to open on the front. And without having the heat directly on the metal, you can turn these things into housing no problem. They dropped off, I can't remember how many thousands of these things they dropped off out in the Pacific Rim after the tsunami. He actually got called up by the UN the following day after that occurred, and they started shipping his stuff out. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And it's stuff like that where, it's something where if we can help point these guys out and let the media know they exist, it's the coolest thing ever for both them and us. But even then, going down to the more smaller blogs even too, it doesn't take a very big blog at all to be able to, call the New York Times on some bogus information, or say, find somebody who's made up a memo that's being used to slander a particular candidate. It's very interesting seeing that there's that level of checking going on. It should be interesting to see whether or not that engenders more careful study of the articles that the newspapers are printing, or whether or not they just ignore it completely and continue to do what they've done all along. I have a suspicion that's probably what's going to happen. Whether or not the news media is changing on a whole is very interesting too, as well. Like I mentioned before, they're doing a lot more in the humor-related area of the spectrum. Somebody asked me a while ago whether or not I was concerned that newspapers would prevent us from linking to them, and I don't think they will, because basically our traffic is revenue, it's money. They love it. In fact, newspapers compete on a regular basis to get their articles linked on us. I mentioned the CNN thing before. It's been several years now, but Fox News, USA Today, and ABC News all submit their own articles, as do a lot of local TV stations. What's really humorous is I was thinking about citing examples, but then I thought I'd probably bust the guys that do this. But you should see some of the taglines that come out on some of these articles submitted by the websites themselves. Shocking. I mean, it's the ones they wish they could write that are just so off color. It's ridiculous. You know, and I'll look at that. I'll be like, did ABC just send that in with that tagline? Oh my God. So it's really kind of funny. It cracks me up. I can see the submitter's email address, and it'll say @abcnews.com on the back of it. So that's usually my first clue. Actually, yes, it is. It is. We don't, because it's, like I said, some of the submitters you just be like, whoa, oh my God. I mean, that happens to me on a regular basis. It definitely freaks me out. Speaking of which, too, this is probably a good time to show it. And this is then I'll take questions right here. This right here is the queue. Punch it up here again because it needs to be refreshed. I have no idea how many articles are in this thing because since I've been talking, I cleared it out at about 5 o'clock or so. We'll see if it actually comes up or not. Otherwise, yep. What are they going to do? Post more burbs to Fark? I mean, come on, who cares, man? So this is basically what I look at like every morning. You can see there's a news flash. That one right there, if you could read or not, it says "Man weds horse." So in the queue, it's nowhere. This is stuff that just showed up. This is the stuff that people have been sending in like since we've been talking, and basically, yeah. This is what's actually showed up in the last hour or so. You can see there's a Total Farkers are talking themselves about, what is this here? Total Farkers car had a bitch fit last night, and they're talking about it to console each other who've got bad cars and stuff like that. And basically, I just got out there here, and I'll pick a couple. I'll say if man weds horse, even though it happened earlier today. That's Princess Charles getting married to Camilla, by the way. Brian Barton captures illegal alien. We'll hold that one back. This is a big-ass comment, and they're still talking about the cars. So anyway, I'll just shoot down here. Abe Vigoda on display at a museum is actually an article we already ran with a different tagline on it. But anyway, first pass is that. I'll shoot down there. I'll find the stuff I want to keep, and then it comes up the second one right here, where 2 articles have come in since I started looking at it, including one classified ad, and then basically here we can do all the edits. And this is where if I need to like get in and tweak a tagline a little bit because of bad grammar, spelling, or whatnot, and that gets by us all the time too. I could do it from here. Change the tagline from, say, obvious to stupid, or from hero to unlikely, or whatever, and get a lot of complaints from that. And then basically just add, delete, or whatever. A couple of the options we have are actually kind of interesting. People ask me how much time I spend on the website, and the answer is basically however much time I have. And the way I get away with this is, I don't know how well you can see this now. Probably not too well at all, but there's the options we have here. I can add it immediately, which I almost never do. Then there's one called Add Later, which will randomly add up to 640 minutes to the distribution time, so it'll pop out later. Then there's Midnight, which will post it to midnight plus 8 hours, up to 8 hours later on. And then there's Delete, knock it off Total Fark completely, or whatnot. The advantage of this is that if I get up in the morning and I got to go, I got to get out of the house, I got to go do something. Usually there's about 300 articles in the queue when I wake up. I can then pick, say 30 links out of this thing, and then send them all and Add Later. And so for the next 8 hours, stuff will roll out without me being there. And so I can go off and do the stuff for the rest of the afternoon and kick back and whatnot. And if we end up having a full day, I can push it out to midnight or whatnot. But the upshot of it is that I'm usually not there. If you have a Total Fark account, you can actually see it in action. The links change color based on stuff that we've looked at already. If we've reviewed it, it's a different color. If it's going to go green light, it's not. And they can tell when I haven't been around for a long time. And if it ends up being a case 10 hours has gone by, they all start freaking out. I start getting phone calls actually. Where are you? You okay? So, but that's basically what that looks like on the back end. Actually, I've only shown that to one other talk I've given too, so that's what that's worth. Any questions? I can talk for days, so hit me. Well, we automatically reject anything that's got a matching URL, for starters, which causes some interesting problems, mainly because there are a lot of times where the news articles are basically being printed on multiple websites simultaneously with different URLs, so obviously that doesn't block. At the same time, there are some local newspapers that don't change their URLs in years. Local columnists, for example. Dave Barry for a while did that, where he didn't have a permanent link to hit his website. So if you tried to submit a Dave Barry article, it wasn't going because it had already been submitted back in 2000 and was continuing getting blocked. And I get some complaints about that. At the same time, I can't keep sane without having that in there because we're getting 2,000 a day blocking duplicate URLs. So God knows how many would be without it, especially during a newsflash type event where everybody tries to submit it all at the same time. Yes? It's really weird. Not surprisingly, like I said, I mean, and part of the talk I've given here is it kind of maybe portrays the fact that it just shouldn't be like that.